Let's see. Any questions? So where did we leave off? You were finished?
Yeah.
So you want to move on to something new?
No, but we were working on our side.
Your work? Oh, you don't want to move on to something new?
Not quite.
Okay, good. Okay. So I am of. But no, go on.
I was just wondering.
When are we going to play chess? Good question. Why don't we play chess on Thursday? Okay. So if and bring a computer or something to play with. So okay. Good. So if who here knows how to play chess? Raise your hand higher. Six. Okay, that's a good number because then what you will do then is teach other people how to play. Mitchell, do you know how to play chess?
Nah, not at all.
Really? Okay. Yes.
Wait, can I just like throw in a fun fact that I just learned last night?
Sure.
I learned that in the Soviet Union, every night, a huge thing was watching a live chess match on TV.
Yes.
And they loved it.
Chess is a huge thing.
It's like
In
the funniest thing.
why is it funny?
I don't know, just watching someone play a game of chess is terribly boring.
It could be, I suppose. You know, anything can be boring if you don't understand it. I think. I mean, watching me talk for an hour and 15 minutes, some people might consider boring. But I know you regard it as a rare privilege. And so, yeah, some people think spending sports, watching a baseball game or a football game is boring. What about you? Sports? Yeah. You don't watch sports, okay, good. So what do you watch? Okay, you can pretend you don't watch television at all. I once was, actually, once was on a job interview, and the person who was chair of this particular department made a big point. So I don't know how many times that morning she told us that she did not have a television set. And then at lunch, she did mention that she had dozed off during the last 5 minutes of a TV show popular at the time called Chicago Hope. And so she wanted to know what happened at the end. So okay. So anyway, I don't know how we got onto that. I suppose there's a different, I suppose if she had said she dozed off during the chess match, would have been different. Okay. So anyone, other fun facts about chess? Does anyone know, by the way, who wrote? Well, actually, no, I won't do this. Play this stupid game with you, trying to make you guess. A series of random questions, and the answer to all of them is Benjamin Franklin, who actually wrote the first piece about chess printed in Russian. I'm not saying he didn't introduce chess to the Russians, but chess is very popular in Russia. And actually, one of the big episodes in the Cold War was a chess match in Iceland between Boris Spassky, who was the Russian grandmaster, and Bobby Fischer, who was the American chess master. Bobby Fischer was actually kind of eccentric. So anyway, if you're going to pin your national hopes on someone, you know, Bobby Fischer might not be the best exemplar, but he was a very good chess player. So we'll learn more about this in days to come. And then Mitchell will be spending his evenings watching chess matches on TV. He'll be videotaping them, recording the strategy, and so on. Okay, good. So, how are the satires coming along? You say great. That's good. Well, let me try to beat that particular dead horse a little bit more since we're all here. Or maybe I won't. I mean, you all look so, some of you look dazed and unsure of what we're doing. Is anyone feeling that way? Maybe I'm just reading the room wrong. Aaron, how are you doing? Fine. Good. Okay, that's good. Didn't mean to single you out. So you know. Okay. So let's see. I thought we would take a look at yet another of these. By the way, when we started off, was it only last week we started on Satires, or was it 2 weeks ago? This pandemic, I've lost track of time. And somehow I think we've been together now for a year. And I know it hasn't been that long. It might seem longer to some of you. When we started off, whenever it was, the first satirical pieces we read were, what was the pseudonym that Franklin used? Okay. Well, let's start over. From the beginning, from wherever I was when I started, rambling incoherently, telling you things that are of no interest to anyone other than, well, okay. In Boston, at the time Benjamin Franklin was born, probably the most important intellectual and cultural figure was someone who dominated his period, someone who is still, by the way, the most prolific writer in the history of Boston. This guy wrote more than 300 books, many of them small, but some of them so lengthy they've never been published because the expense would be too great. In fact, right now, there's a project at the University of Georgia to produce this guy's annotation of the Bible, which is so long, no publisher ever would print it. Plus, there's all kinds of weird stuff in the margins. This guy also is the first real New England historian. He wrote the first history of New England, which is one of the great books in American literature. And I was tempted to assign it to you, but decided not to. It's called The Magnalia Christi Americana. I don't know what this means, by the way. If I assign a book called Magnalia Christi Americana, would anyone know what it's about? Many of his titles were in Latin. Sign a very edition. Give a clue, Brittany, what this means. I said it's a history of New England, and some of you are probably wondering, how do you get New England out of this? It's something about the greatness of God in America. Okay, so that's essentially this guy's theme. And this poor guy, and by the way, if the weather weren't so bad, if there weren't restrictions about going out in groups, actually going out in groups would probably be much safer than sitting in here in an enclosed room. However, since I'm the only one who's allowed to open his mouth, but anyway, I would march you to the north end to this guy's grave, which is in the Cops Hill burying ground. Okay, Gordon's right. Sorry, Mitchell's writing this down. Gordon already knows where this is. We've made many a pilgrimage there to Cops Hill to see the grave of New England's most illustrious divine, great erudite man of letters. No one still has a clue. Isabel, do you have a clue? So you're looking that way, no one else is speaking this. Yes.
He's the guy with the, like the vaccine, no, he didn't do vaccination, but like the.
The inoculation
Yeah, the
guy.
inoculation guy.
Yeah,
That
and
guy.
do you remember the inoculation guy's name?
No.
It's Seth. Okay, I'll give you a hint. One of his grandfathers was probably Puritanism's greatest theologian, maybe. He at least probably wouldn't have told you so, but he would have liked it if he thought it was. John Cotton. And his other grandfather was the first minister in Dorchester. Oh, see, now it's not fair. Now you know. Let someone else have a turn. His other grandfather. Richard. See, this is killing Gordon now, because he knows. Richard Mather. Okay. And I am told, I haven't tracked this down, that descendant many times removed had a starring role in a very popular 1950s television show called Leave It to Beaver. Jerry Mather was apparently descended from Cotton Mather too. And I'm sure the name Jerry Mather, the Beaver, is as distant to you as is the name Cotton Mather, Increase Mather, Richard Mather, all these other Mathers, right? Okay, so conscious of the passage of time. Now, Increase Mather was Cotton Mather's father, and he winds up marrying actually John Cotton's widow. It's a long, complicated family lineage, as people who women die and then their husbands marry again, or husbands die, women marry again. So long, complicated story. It's not as though they're, engaging in swapping spouses and that kind of behavior. Anyway, Cotton Mather. Have I talked much about Cotton Mather? You seem to know the smallpox. Have I exhausted the subject? Since no one could remember his name, I'm a little skeptical that you're bored to death with Cotton Mather, but that may be the reason no one remembers his name. Is that the reason? You just put it out of your minds, that you never wanted to hear about that crashing war again? Well, you're not in luck, because I have plenty more to say about Cotton Mather. Did I tell you anything at all about it? You're saying something, yes.
Didn't he have like one of the newspapers and got like the government gave, no.
See, now you're confusing him with the Franklins. So apparently, somewhere along the line, and I can sense where the fingers are going to be pointed, this story got really garbled. And the one common denominator here, of course, is me. So I'm going to say, if someone is responsible for misleading all of you good people about Cotton Mather, it was probably the one person who's talked about Cotton Mather over the course of your entire lives. You've ever heard of Cotton Mather before? Okay. I don't blame, by the way, I don't blame you if you've not heard someone or something. I blame your teachers, but that's a story for another day. In fact, at one time I was thinking of running for office. I think the most problems in education come to two sources, teachers and parents, and that would be probably said enough. I probably should remember just before I started recording things. Okay, let me just see if I can find all I have to say about Cotton Mather. The Cotton Mather, as I said, is the most eminent, well, most prolific writer in Boston's history. And you give me a minute, I will tell you much more about him, more than you ever wanted to know. Okay, 1 second. This. Maybe we could all just look in the back where the slide I want to show you is up. Okay, good. That's me. There's a reason for it. So that essentially is Boston, roughly between 1630. This map was done in 1775. And here you can see the Shawmut Peninsula. We are right about here on Beacon Hill. Actually, I have a pointer here somewhere. Actually, now, it's also showing up front. Just see, this is really weird. I can't get this to. Okay, let me see. Now we see all of New England. And we should just turn the room around. What do you think? Okay, good. Not really good. What I wanted to show you is the back of the room. And let me just see if I can just further make this difficult. sad and hopeless. Does anyone else know how to do this? Probably wondering why I'm the one trying to figure this out. And if the deed had warned me, I probably would swear I figured that out. Anyway, but I really don't understand why this is doing what it's doing, but we'll try to make the best. Okay, increased matter. Increased matter was minister, spent much of his adult life in England, happy being a traveling minister in England. There, roughly between the 1640s and 1660, leaves in 1660 because civil war in England, his side had been winning for about 20 years. But you'll probably recall, they cut off the head of King Charles I, run England without a king for about 20 years, and the Puritans are really happy. And I know that's an incongruous thought for Puritans to be happy, but for a time they had power, which probably means if you're not a Puritan, you weren't happy during those years. And in 1660, the king comes back, well, a different king, the son of the king who had lost his head. And Increase Mather thus comes back to Boston. And here in Boston, he is the minister in the North End. This is not the church he was the minister in. He is a minister of what was called the North Meeting House, or the third meeting house in Boston. And he is a very good minister, theologian, Puritan. He's president of Harvard. And in fact, Increase Mather is the only president of Harvard whom Harvard permitted not to live in Cambridge. Remember, he had been in England. Being back in Boston for him was really kind of a letdown. He certainly doesn't want to have to trek out to Cambridge, which is a farming community, to be president of Harvard and have to deal with all the undergraduates and do all of the other things that college presidents have to do. By the way, if you ever run into a college president, don't say that I said dealing with undergraduates is a chore. But Increase Mather is certainly someone who would have thought it was, because he was a much more erudite, worldly person. Great minister, great theologian, also a pretty capable organizer since he is president of Harvard at one time. Now, among his many children was the person I was trying to get you to guess at earlier. Actually, this is Richard Mather. This is John Cotton. And this is Increase again. And any moment now, I will show you Increase's son, Cotton Mather. There it is. This is a Cotton Mather a little bit later in life. I wanted to find a picture of the young Cotton Mather, but apparently no such picture exists. By the way, the Puritans weren't really big about having pictures done of themselves. That was a form of vanity. And vanity is, as you're probably aware, one of the vices they would have seen. Even Franklin saw vanity as a vice, since he said humility is a virtue. Anyway, Cotton Mather is a brilliant child. He becomes a brilliant man, of course, as I think I've already indicated. But he was exceptionally bright, and think about it. His father is the leading Puritan minister of his generation. His two grandfathers are the leading Puritan ministers of their generation. And he is destined to be the leading Puritan minister of his generation. And he has so much of a head start on this that Cotton Mather is to this day the youngest person ever admitted to study at Harvard at the age of, I think, 11 or 12. Now, that's, 14 to 16 was the typical age. But still, you may recall being 11 or 12, and there's a big difference there between being 14 or 16. He is admitted to Harvard at the age of 12, the son of the leading theologian of the day, named for the two leading theologians of their generation. Now you are now college undergraduates, and let's imagine you're also very bright college undergraduates, and let's imagine for a moment that also there entered the room someone who was 4 or so years younger than you, whom we all knew was smarter than all of us and was destined to be our leader. How would you respond? Wonderful. We now have someone who's really smart here. And of course, professors, you may notice, gravitate toward the really bright students. We like answering their questions, enter into a dialogue with them to the exclusion of the moron, the other students who don't quite grasp what it is we're saying. You know, the ones who already know how to play chess and say, isn't it wonderful? In the Soviet Union, people will watch this for hours. How are the other students going to respond to young Cotton Mather, smarter than they are, better than they are? Yes?
They probably won't be so happy to have them in their class.
They won't be happy to have them in their class, Chloe, you're right. But imagine that. And I'm not saying this is how you would react. Let's talk about how they might react. And will they be warm and welcoming and as full of admiration as they should be? Or might they be malicious and taunt him and do other things that, remember, there were no bullying protocols at Harvard in the middle of the 1600s and other things that might have protected young Cotton Mather from the torment he will endure from his peers, which he does. Nonetheless, he graduates from Harvard with a sterling academic record, because he knows he's really not there to please these other rubes. He is there to get his education so he can begin his career as the leading intellectual and theological light of his generation. Now, by the way, did I tell you what career is marked out for him? A career anyone entering Harvard, well, the reason Harvard was created was to train ministers. And being a minister is the thing you go to Harvard to begin to learn how to do, something that's quite distant now from Harvard's mission. But in this period, does anyone know how you became a minister in the middle of the 1600s? Excuse me?
You went to Harvard?
You go to Harvard, that's right, that's the first step, okay. Doesn't seem so difficult now to get that piece of it, does it, Joanna? And this is why some professors regret not having more Cotton Mathers in their classroom. Who, anyway, so that's the first step. Next one. Yeah.
Graduate.
You graduate, that's very good, very good. Yeah, you graduate from Harvard, which now he has done. And this is a little tricky. I am, by the way, I'm not deducting points if you don't know this one. Chloe.
I mean, this is just a guess, I don't know, but I think you'd have to go find a church.
That's it. You do have to go find a church. You have to find a congregation that wants to hire you, okay? And so essentially, congregations, their minister might have left. By the way, one of the things you'll learn if you spend any time at all, and I'm not saying you should do this, looking through church records of the 17th or 18th century. And by the way, just a block and a half from where we are now is the leading depository of 17th, 18th century church records anywhere in the world, New England church records, the Congregational Library. They have tons of stuff. And they have this massive project, New England Hidden Histories, because in the church records, you find all kinds of things. The main thing you find are arguments between a congregation and the minister. The congregation has a contract with the minister. He is supposed to preach and do other things, and they are supposed to pay him. And one thing ministers do and I'm not going to anticipate that you know what ministers do, is they admonish people about their sins. And you can probably understand that if a minister is constantly admonishing you about your sins, you're going to be a little reluctant to pay him for this. And other things, did we really say we're going to give you that much firewood? How much firewood are you actually burning? And other things. So it's not an easy task being a minister. It's probably, well, we don't need to get into the problems of the ministry of the 17th and 18th century. Suffice it to say, the simple answer, Chloe already got it. Find a church, then you have to get the church to agree you're the person they want preaching to. And Cotton Mather, brilliant theological mind, gifted writer. His childhood has also left him with two kinds of problems. One is a certitude that he is better than everyone else. And two, he has a pronounced stutter. Now, either one of those things is going to be a handicap in your life as a minister. Because one thing a minister has to do is speak for several hours at a stretch, giving a sermon. And when Cotton Mather tries out at one or two churches which show an interest in having him come and preach to them, the congregation decides they would rather not. He can find only one position offered to him, and that is as the assistant pastor at Boston's Third Meeting House in the North End. Who is the pastor? Yes, his father. So his father hires Cotton Mather to be his assistant. Now, Cotton Mather was not his father's first child. In fact, Increase Mather is not a young man when he and his, I think, third wife give birth to Cotton Mather. So Cotton Mather, even now, as his father's assistant, might anticipate that at some point his father will be called to his great reward, and that will be Cotton Mather's entry into being the pastor of the Third Meeting House. However, Increase Mather lives to the age of 95. Cotton Mather is his father's assistant for 40 years. And he does finally succeed to the ministry and lives for another 4 or 5 years. And then he is called to his reward. So, and also Cotton Mather does marry 3 times. One of his wives dies. The second wife goes insane. He has, over the course of his life, 15 children. He buries 13 of them. So in many ways, it's a sad life for Cotton Mather. And I'm not saying this to warn you about being brilliant, having a brilliant academic career. You could take it as that, but just say, here is a guy who does have a lot of crosses to bear. I'm not quite sure how we got onto this subject. Probably should have just kept talking about chess, but for some reason, Cotton Mather came upon us, and here he is. Now, what does this have to do with Benjamin Franklin? You're probably, were you asking that? Okay. Now you know my pedagogical method then is to ask you why you were asking that.
This class is about Benjamin Franklin.
It is. So why are we spending all this time talking about this wacky Puritan, Cotton Mather, and his academic failures, successes, and troubled life, and so on? One of the books Cotton Mather wrote was called, I've already told you one name of the book he wrote. What was this book of history?
Christi Americana.
Magnalia, very good. Magnalia Christi Americana. Here's another one, Bonifacius. And the Bonifacius, he had a Latin name. Anyone know what it means? Let me give you a hint. He also, by the way, wrote the book on witchcraft. In 1688, while his father was out of town, there was a witchcraft outbreak in Boston, and Cotton Mather helps to overcome this troublesome outbreak of witchcraft. Something, by the way, his father had predicted. And I have to say, just a brief word about Increase Mather. In the whole history of the country, I don't think there has been anyone quite as good as Increase Mather in pointing out bad things that were going to happen. He usually didn't point them out before they happened, but once they did, he was always ready to say, I knew this was going to happen, and I knew why it was going to happen. So for example, in 1711, when Benjamin Franklin, about whom this course is, was 5 years old, a fire wiped out most of downtown Boston. And at the end, after the fire, which destroyed the entire central business district, it's the reason why Long Wharf was built in 1713, actually with rubble from the fire. A new state house was built that we now call the Old State House. The first church was built, and the north end, though, was spared, and thus the great gathering to raise funds for the sufferers was held at Increase Mather's church, and he got to give the sermon, which is called Burnings Bewailed, about this fire. And he said he knew he knew there was going to be a fire like this. Just like in the 1680s, he knew there was going to be witchcraft, because we had so many other problems, okay? He knew there was going to be a fire, as God was going to punish us for our sinful behavior. And for Increase Mather, the biggest thing that was really ticking off God was the foolish custom men had adopted of shaving their heads, and instead of their own hair, wearing these really absurd wigs. He thought this was really a sign of vanity for which God was punishing all of Boston by destroying the central business district. Now, I know some of you now are looking at the picture of his son and saying, well, was he sitting there while his father's talking about this foolish custom of wearing wigs? And you can see why his life was not necessarily an easy one. A father who did always know best and was always ready to point it out, okay? So, Cotton Mather, nonetheless, is busy writing these books. And by the way, I was telling you about witchcraft. The reason the way you know someone is a witch is if being a witch in itself is not necessarily a crime, but it is the doing of bad things, which is maleficio. Okay, so I'm wondering if you can now put together maleficium, bona fide, which is doing bad things, and bonifacius both have the same root, which means to make something. Actually comes from, anyway. I'm actually teaching you way more than I was supposed to. Now we're venturing into Latin and root words and things like that, which I know the dean has told me to stop because you haven't learned this so far. Why should you now? Anyway, if maleficium is doing bad things, you have boni and faci being the doing. Yes, Chloe.
Guessing doing good things.
Doing good things, yes. Tyler, that you're going to say. The doing of good things. So this is a book about the doing of good things. And it's a relatively short book. And one thing that Mather proposes in this is every morning begin by asking the question, what good shall I do today? And at the end of the day, asking yourself, what good have I done today? Anyone heard those questions before? Yes.
It was in Benjamin Franklin's All Around.
Yeah. Where do you think he got the ideas? From the book, exactly. So Franklin knew this book. And yeah, so let me see where we are with this. Here we go. Now, during the smallpox episode, which I know I told you about because at least one person remembers it, Cotton Mather wrote, his daughter died. Yeah, and he buries. He preaches her funeral sermon. And this is at a time when Cotton Mather is being subjected to all kinds of ridicule by the Franklin's newspaper. They called him things like a baboon, a dunghill cock, and a vain, credulous preacher, and other things. And someone, did I mention someone threw a bomb through his window? Yeah, okay. Chloe's saying no, Tyler's saying yes. You did hear that story. Okay, good. I apologize. You know, I actually just go from classroom to classroom telling the same stories. I can never quite remember which group I have subjected to this one. Yeah, okay. So anyway, so what do you do when the world is attacking you? This bitter, vicious world, and people are saying all of these not only unkind things, but untrue things about you. I know for a fact Cotton Mather was not a baboon, nor was he a dunghill cock, but he was a minister trying to do what was best. And what do you say? How do you respond to the world's ridicule, the world's hatred? None of you have been in a position of having to do this, and I hope and pray you won't be. Yes, you don't what?
Respond.
You don't respond, yes, Chloe.
I feel like you would try to defend yourself.
You'd say you try to defend yourself. Cotton Mather would be more with Gordon here. His sermon is called Satires. Silence. You maintain a holy and dignified silence in the face of the world's hatred and ridicule. So this is the one thing he publishes during this time when people are throwing bombs through his window and calling him all kinds of nasty things. Maintain a holy and dignified silence, which is certainly one pretty big clue as to whom the silence do-good essays were aimed at. You take his most recent book, his most famous book, put them together, and you have a name for this middle-aged widow who is always ready to tell people what they should be doing. Let me just see if I can find this. No. I shall conclude this with my own character, which one would think I should be best able to give. Know then, I am an enemy to vice and a friend to virtue. I am one of an extensive charity and a great forgiver of private injuries, a hearty lover of the clergy and all good men, and a mortal enemy to arbitrary government and unlimited power. I am naturally very jealous for the rights and liberties of my country, and the least appearance of an encroachment on those invaluable privileges is apt to make my blood boil exceedingly. What do you make of this? enemy to vice, friend to virtue, extensive charity, forgiver of private injuries, a hearty lover of the clergy and of all good men, and a mortal enemy to arbitrary government and unlimited power. All of these certainly describe Cotton Mather. And Cotton Mather also, we know, is very jealous for the rights and liberties of his country, and the least appearance made his blood boil exceedingly. What do you make of that phrase? Anyone here's blood ever boiled exceedingly? How much can your blood boil? I'm always curious about the adverb. Why is the adverb there? Brittany, you're either thinking, you either see the same thing or.
I can just I know what it's like to make your blood boil a
Okay.
lot. I don't know why for
Okay.
him, but I feel the same.
Okay. Is there, let me ask this. Is boiling something that can be done a little bit, moderately? Does your blood ever boil moderately?
No.
No?
No.
So why exceedingly? Yes.
Now, hear that I kind of think of, like, if you put a pot of water on the stove and it boils, it can just boil in the pot, then it can also boil over.
If you boil
So
over,
maybe boiling excessively is almost like boiling over past, like,
your blood boils over. And what happens when your blood boils over? Yes.
you make a mess all over the kitchen.
No, yeah, we would make a mess all over the kitchen. Is the exceedingly necessary here, or is it put there to undercut the fact that your blood is boiling? I mean, if you are enraged, say I'm really enraged, it's an unnecessary word. I'm thinking that this is using the adverb as a way of not strengthening what you're saying, but actually weakening, which happens. So your blood, and by the way, what do you do when your blood is boiling? Yes,
You're angry.
you are angry,
You shout.
you shout. Is it effective? I'm seeing this as setting up someone who does get really upset, but doesn't really act effectively. And one thing we know too is, well, poor Cotton Mather had been involved in episodes where he's not really very effective, and his father or someone else has bailed out the situation. I was told, I wanted to offer a course on the age of Cotton Mather, but there seemed to be few takers. So they said, choose someone else from that time period, which is why we're here with Frank. Okay, so I have likewise a natural inclination to observe and reprove the faults of others, at which I have an excellent faculty. What's this mean? Yes.
He's like really good at pointing out when other people mess up.
Yeah, is, yeah. And is that a virtue? Something you want to know? But boy, you would like to hang around with people who are really good at pointing out your faults?
I don't think I would.
No. Anyone? Is anyone here really good at pointing out the faults of others? Gordon is. Notice he's sitting alone. I'm sorry. Gordon. I speak this by way of a warning to all such whose offenses shall come under my cognizance, for I never intend to wrap my talent in a napkin. To be brief, I am courteous and affable, good humored unless I am first provoked, and handsome and sometimes witty, but always, sir, your friend and humble servant, Silence, do good. I'm pretty sure the readers of the New England Current when they read this, knew exactly who Silence Dogood was supposed to be. Silence Dogood is Cotton Mather, and this is a description of Cotton Mather. And had we been the smart guys sitting around the office of the New England Current, we probably would have seen this immediately and couldn't believe someone is really putting on Cotton Mather in a way Cotton Mather really should, much more effectively than throwing a bomb through his window. You're ridiculing it. You're making Cotton Mather into a laughing stock. And this is something that the author of this understood. Much more effective to do this. So I can't help but read this and feel a little badly now for Cotton Mather, who is having all this other stuff. And now he has this anonymous writer in the New England Current pointing this out. Anyway. Any questions on this? Okay, let me just see where we go with this now. Okay. This is when is it? 1721, 1722, April of 1722, and let's see. Okay. 60 years later, or so, Benjamin Franklin is in Paris. He is the American minister there, had negotiated a treaty with the French, and he is probably the most famous American of his era, one of the most famous people in the world. And there he is in Paris, and he gets a letter from Boston from a man named Samuel Mather. And Samuel Mather is a minister in Boston, and Samuel Mather has written a book of advice to the American people, which he is hoping will get a wide audience. And his way of encouraging a wide readership is to send a copy to Benjamin Franklin, hoping he will help promote the book. Samuel Mather is also the son of Cotton Mather. And Benjamin Franklin, now, okay, who can anticipate Benjamin Franklin's response now to Samuel Mather? None of you can. Yes, Chloe, you can.
I'd say it's probably not going to be a very positive response. He didn't like Cotton Mather so much.
Yeah, you would think that. You definitely would. But let me read it to you. It's actually much more. I mean, this is an extraordinary letter. I received your kind letter with your excellent advice to the peoples of the United States, which I read with great pleasure and hope it will be duly regarded. Such writings, though they may be lightly passed over by many readers, yet if they make a deep impression on one active mind in 100, the effect may be considerable. Permit me to mention one little instance, which, though it relates to myself, will not be quite uninteresting to you. When I was a boy, I met with a book entitled Essays to Do Good, which I think was written by your father. It had been so little regarded by a former possessor that several leaves of it were torn out. But the remainder gave me such a turn of thinking as to have an influence on my conduct through life. For I have always set a greater value on the character of a doer of good than on any other kind of reputation. And if I have been, as you seem to think, a useful citizen, the public owes the advantage of it to that book. Extraordinary. Samuel Mather's trying to flatter Franklin by saying you're a useful citizen, and Franklin says that's the highest character I've ever aspired to, and it's all because of this book that your father wrote. Any comments on this? It goes on. That's really not the last piece of this. You mentioned your being in your 78th year. I am in my 79th. We are grown old together. It is now more than 60 years since I left Boston, but I remember well both your father and grandfather, having heard them in their pulpits and seen them in their houses. So he knew these guys. Not only had he heard Increase Mather preach and Cotton Mather preach, he had seen them in their homes. Okay. The last time I saw your father was in the beginning of the year 1724, when I visited him after my first trip to Pennsylvania. So shortly after writing these Silence Doggett essays, Benjamin Franklin leaves Boston, runs off to Pennsylvania, comes back about a year and a half later, and who does he call on but Cotton Mather? Is it just audacity on Franklin's part or effrontery? Would you do this, Gordon? Having written, mocking this guy, Chloe saying, no, she certainly couldn't. Is this more shocking to you than what you were anticipating? Simply ignoring Samuel Mather. Here's another of these Mather cranks trying to give advice to people. And, I said 60 years ago that really a marvelous faculty at pointing out the faults of others, and here they're at it again, but that's not what he says. He says this is good advice. And so he goes to call on Cotton Mather in his house. He received me in his library, and on my taking leave, showed me a shorter way out of the house, through a narrow passage, which was crossed by a beam overhead. We were still talking as I withdrew, he accompanying me behind, and I turning partly towards him, when he hastily said, stoop, stoop. I did not understand him, till I felt my head hit against the beam. He was a man that never missed any occasion of giving instruction. And upon this, he said to me, you are young and have the world before you. Stoop as you go through it, and you will miss many hard thumps. This advice, thus beat into my head, has frequently been of use to me, and I often think of it when I see pride mortified and misfortunes brought upon people by their carrying their heads too high. Isn't that amazing? Cotton Mather giving this advice to Benjamin Franklin, stoop as you go through life, and you will miss many hard thumps. So this is probably enough about Cotton Mather and Franklin for today. I could go on. In fact, I'm tempted to give you more advice that will carry you through life. Stooping often is a good, what do you make of that? Stoop often as you go through life. Yes, Chloe.
I feel like it kind of means like be confident.
Yes.
Or else you'll, like hit your head on the ceiling, I guess, if you get
Yeah,
hit head.
yeah.
Like it'll bite you.
So, because here you have this 70-plus-year-old Cotton Mather giving this advice to 18-year-old Benjamin Franklin, who implicitly sees what Mather means. It's not, watch out for low-hanging beams in these 17th century houses, but don't carry your head too high. And Franklin had already, as he said, this book gave him this turn of thinking. And this is why when he gets to Philadelphia, he has this daily plan beginning and ending with the same question Cotton Mather had said to him. Okay. Let me see if there's more to say about this. I'm sure there is. Anyone else have more to say about this? Or is this enough of a lesson for today? And you wish you had a preacher like Cotton Mather who could help bring it all home and tell you about the Increase Mather in many ways would have told you what led to whatever misfortune you have right now. Okay. Well, in the time remaining, why don't you get together with your groups and further work on your work, and I will try to calm myself down for this long engagement with that matter.
You get to start your draft. Is that?
Work through it and then like put it on, so I'm not like, I don't feel like I'm like, you look and there's like a bunch of jumble of stuff, so I'm like working on it, like I'm not documental, no, put it on.
Awesome. I haven't talked to him about it, but I can ask him today.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't want Marguerite suffering. He hasn't been in class. So it's like something wrong.
Yeah, that sounds good. I can ask him.
There's more like material and for the.
So like it's just like, yeah, and like I get that, I'm not saying I'm amazing.
No,
Done, but I'm just like, it's just more like wanting to make sure you've done it and turn it in time.
I just have a first draft of my piece. You guys want to like? just take that?
Yeah, I saw it, 'cause I looked at it earlier to see if anything. But I'll-
Suggestions or questions?
I kind of read through it, and it's just around.
Yeah. No, no.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then as I was writing it, I was like.
Also, really formatted.
That's what I said. It's true. Is
that like the like life and stuff we're looking for? Or is that-
I think so, I think it was, yeah.
Yeah.
As long as it's not like.
Plus there's four of them together in a lineup.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we have like very easy, like, or like there's a paragraph that you can take.
Yeah.
Which I think is pretty good. at that.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah, that's what I did.
Double space.
Yeah, that's actually.
3 seconds. It's not bad.
Yeah, no, I do too. Good to see like what other people's ideas are.
Yeah, like see what their approach is, like what they decided to do there.
Yeah, I wonder if there's like other people that do something like that.
Yeah, I was thinking that as well, seeing who chose what they did.
Oh, yeah.
I'll finish mine up at least we can.
Wait, are we still doing side?
Yeah, at least we did.
For submitting it, I would want to put it all the
It's not crying. Or like what I saw. that's. I don't know. We didn't know the right thing on this, but according to. Yeah.
Oh, perfect.
And then like.
Awesome. I like the first week of school, I didn't have to like investigate, so I tried for like 2 hours to like sign up.
Yeah, so just the website.
So right now it sounds like. I think I mean, it sounds like.
Yeah, from what I got.
I'm just calling it. It's a letter, but I usually. I never.
So the way she.
I don't really care.
Time then to do it, so remember this day, remember your breaks, don't get.
You don't really know where to go.
Yeah, exactly. That's why it was my part, because, like, it's like this whole classroom, in one aspect sucks, like, it's not the first and the last, like, first one, but it's like, I get it. So, it's literally done as breaks. So, yeah, that's the first one, I counted every other. Kind of, you know, like, yeah, so it's really good at this one. But anyway. Yeah, so it's I actually get lunch instead of. So that's my biggest.
Yeah, like.
I think like, since I can use my hands and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's no time.
Yeah, exactly. What do you think about that? How do you feel about
Like, it's right one and the like. Yeah. Because I was like, I was.
Yeah, I think those ones are a little more difficult.
Okay, so when you post this, one person can post it, just make sure you list whoever else was involved. Yes.
So it's due on Thursday, but what specific time, like before class or before midnight? Before midnight?
No. We're just, we're.
Yeah. Yeah.
The guy from Texas. the letters in that word. You ever get those like less like
I was walking in class and I was like, bicep and I saw it, he was in the cemetery. And when I saw him like run out of the cemetery, run across the street, run into the I was near my way to class. I'm like, my God. Standing there, just
It's not like he was running late.
We can say better.
Oh, yeah.
Outside of school, but like they don't do it. Yeah, I feel like they should, especially like our apparently have it, like just to make sure if they won't let me use. Yeah, everyone I was around like even like closer than we were,
I just
like
said
test
Joe.
negative. So it's really strange.
I had like a similar situation with one of my friends at my building. She tested positive, but she wasn't sick at all. And I brought her negative like multiple times.
Yeah. And it was like, I mean, like, I don't know. I was like really close contact with one person. And they were like negative, like where I would have done with them. Nope. And that's the only one. That's like, I would only say I chat. I would have said people. And like, I mean, I was wearing a mask the entire time, but then more like people would test me, and I still somehow like stuff. So it's like everyone around me, and like playing the game, that's just double checking it pretty hard. If you did have it, you don't need to not test it right now. Because something's not testing me. And it's automatic.
Yeah, I was actually just after this week started.
Just write everything down.
Yeah, my
Cool.
I
You can also like,
Oh, yeah, I know, I looked it up, it's May 11th, the last day of the semester, they called. So, yeah, so unless you're testing back in the fall. But, I don't know.
I don't
No,
think
it
by the
doesn't.
fall, I'm not.
Yeah, I have a plan.
My school was. Keep getting out of our housing situation. Yeah.
At that point, they're not like, for that, I think it's more like, but I remember in the email they sent. It was like, if you already kind of removed out, why are they? But then next week, I remember like.
From like.
No, like in the summer, getting that email saying we're not.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, especially if this was choices for them to not be. Oh my God. What is it? Before this, her roommate like said, they have been moving to a different rooms. And so then the university was like, okay, you're now single now, you have to, you're trying to see for. Yeah. It's not her fault, but now she's being charged for a single. Yeah, she gets the whole reserve. No, appreciative of, but like, she's like not being charged for a single. Not for no reason. Oh, okay. Yeah, that her roommate next door to her. Yeah, she wanted to like go with one of her friends or something. Like, oh, he doesn't have someone else to do that first. So she's making sure that. Oh, well, that's for her. Oh my gosh, I don't know where the meeting is doing it with someone. Like, I'm imagining the room with 4 people in the bathroom. Yeah.
That's what I was thinking before, like my room, it's like I have been for like I do all by myself, so I can like push both the beds together.
Yeah, me too. Me too. This is nice.
Like, it feels like perfect for like 2 people, like just like running out of the 2 rooms.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I don't know, like
People in
like,
that bathroom. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking about too.
yeah, I live in Tustin, like I don't have one. Like the rooms, I think it's because like it's like upperclassmen.
Yeah, I think it's a lottery system.
Yeah, exactly. So like I don't have like all my friends have like, and it's like you get like a little like it's not very huge, but like a little kitchen.
Yeah.
Oh my God, shoot, so nice. It's like the rooms have like fireplaces.
Yeah, we're not in